today, President Biden's 81st birthday. He's celebrating with family privately. And as the election gets closer, at top of mind for a lot of voters, his age and perceptions that his physical and mental fitness have declined. A new NBC poll shows President Biden trailing behind former President Trump for the first time in a hypothetical matchup. Trump getting support from 46% of registered voters, Biden getting 44%. We do want to mention this falls within the poll's margin of error. Joining us now, Republican strategist Boyd Matheson, also former chief of staff to Senator Mike Lee, and the host of Inside Sources on KSL. Margin of error, we read into these polls, how it's art is in the eye of the beholder, right? But how big of a hit is this for the Biden team? How will they strategize around some new numbers?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for the Biden team is everything else that's going on around them. They've really tried to hang their hat on Bidenomics, and it's just not flying with the American people. Because even though the president can say we're doing better here or things are going up not quite as fast over there, he's forgotten that the American people are not economists. They're consumers, and all they know is that things cost more, that the holidays are going to be tougher, and that's the real challenge for the Biden administration. Is not only are they sinking and sagging in those polls, and not just against the former president, he's also lagging even further behind potential head-to-head matchups with Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and even Christie. And so there's a host of holes in the boat there for the Biden administration. They've got to figure out how to navigate that from age to economy and everything in between.
And speaking of some of the other candidates running in the primary, New Hampshire's coming up. What do you expect from Haley, Christie, Ramaswamy now to break away from the pack, DeSantis as well, moving into this next debate?
Yeah, the next debate's going to be really important, I think, for each of those. Nikki Haley is clearly the candidate on the rise. She's been able to parlay not just her own experience. You have to remember, Marnie, she was the first to get in and really kind of struggled and was just kind of undulating along there for a long time. And then suddenly world events shift. There's a bigger focus on what's happening in Ukraine and the Middle East, and her unique experience from the UN suddenly catapults her into a different space. She's been able to parlay that into some good momentum there. The DeSantis campaign is kind of the flip of that. A lot of people were excited about the idea of a DeSantis run and that he could be a formidable challenger to the former president. And he's been a little lackluster in that, not real engaging on the trail. In the first couple of debates, there's a lot of criticism that he has a scowl going. He's not having fun. He's not enjoying any of this. And so that's been the challenge there. And so you've kind of seen a tale of two candidates there. Christie continues to just kind of hit at the former president. That's what he's in there for. That's what he's doing. I don't think that moves the needle at all in terms of either Iowa, New Hampshire, or South Carolina. I do think, Marnie, that Nikki Haley has an interesting thing. She's getting up almost to that 20% range in New Hampshire. She's not likely to win Iowa. I think the former president will win that handily. But then it's just a week later, they'll go to New Hampshire. And I think she has a shot there to do really well. And then, of course, the state after that is her home territory in South Carolina. So I think she's got an interesting run there. If she could connect the dots on those three states, it could really propel her into more of a head-to-head match with the former president.
We just reported that Governor Abbott is now endorsing Trump. How big of a hit was that for the DeSantis campaign, as you mentioned, him struggling to pick up any momentum?
Yeah, and it's interesting. He's actually relied a lot on these kind of endorsements to drive his campaign, and these races today are not about endorsements. They are about hand-to-hand, person-to-person, having that interaction with real voters. The days of the big endorsement really carrying things, I think, are gone because everybody can go directly to the citizens, directly to the voters. And so while it is a bit of a hit just because DeSantis made it a campaign issue that he wanted that endorsement, and he has been chasing endorsements, but I think it's been a mistake for him, actually. He's chased so many endorsements. He hasn't been channeling his resources, his energy, and his focus to be in those one-on-one combinations with actual voters, where I think he could actually have a little better and a little more persuasive argument.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.